Hello, everyone, and welcome to Culture Exposure Book Club. I am Allison Carvalho, the events manager for Barbara's Bookstores. Barbara's has been a Chicago institution since 1963, and we are so incredibly excited to be hosting this event with you today. We are family owned and operated, and we pride ourselves on creating community spaces within our bookstores as well as out of them, like this event. Before we begin the discussion, I want to give a quick tour of Crowdcast for those of you that haven't been here before. Firstly, obviously, we are still pretty new to virtual events, as shown by the fact that we had to start a little bit late today. Thank you so much for your patience as we were figuring out those technical difficulties. If we do arise in any more technical difficulties, please bear with us. We will get things back up and running as quickly as we can. Please make sure that while our panelists are engaging in the discussion, that you engage as well. You can use our chat. You can also use the ask a question function at the bottom of the screen to ask any questions that you think might be pertinent to the conversation. And we will also be engaging in the chat as well. And then if you'd like, you can also upvote other people's questions. So it's a great chance to kind of be part of the conversation. We're still figuring out the format for these events. So for this one, we decided to do it on Crowdcast just to kind of test it out. But we might be looking at other platforms in the future, and we will make sure to let you know that once that happens. Also, we are hoping to eventually do these in person, but we will also be live streaming when we do them in person as well. But we're not anticipating doing that until closer to 2021, when it's safe for everyone to be a part of it. If you notice your video is lagging or freezing at all, please make sure to hit your HD setting. It's the little tiny gear button, and you can hit that and switch it to 360. That tends to help with any lag that you might experience. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you're going to see a button, a little green button, and it says you can purchase Octavia's Brute here. If you haven't had a chance to read the book yet, it's okay. This conversation is about being able to tell you a little bit about the book just as much as engaging with it. So if you'd like, you can totally click that button and purchase a copy. We will also be talking about what our next book will be, and I'll be sticking the link for that one in the comments as well. And lastly, of course, we want this to be an informative, fun, and safe space. So please be respectful to everyone that you engage with on the chat and throughout the event, and make sure to talk with us. We want to engage with you, and we want this to be a lot of back and forth. So please, please do. Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead and bring on and start talking about our panelists. So what I'd like to do is have everyone introduce themselves and say a little bit about what they do. Let's begin with Elise. Oh, hey, Elise, I think you're on mute. Hold on. Ah, there we go. You're not mute anymore. Okay, there you go.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Yes, my name is Elise. I'm a part of the Office Hour Collective. I've been working in diversity and inclusion for about 4 years now. And a lot of that has been nonprofit work, anti-oppression, anti-racism, gender equality. And that's how I met the amazing Nat. And that's why I'm here today and just a part of this amazing collective. And I'm excited to just educate and just help people have breakthroughs and just understand the world we're living in, and not just a one-dimensional perspective. I want to really open up people's perspectives to be 360 and just to really be just informed and just be a better ally and just overall human, definitely. So thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Thank you for being here. That's lovely. Simone.
Hi, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. So I'm Simone. I'm also a part of the Office Hour Collective. I work as a clinical counselor, and I bring the trauma-informed portion of our fight for social justice to the Office Hour Collective. So I'm really happy to be here. Looking forward to everything we have going on.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Alrighty, so Crocodile, you are the founder of the Office Hour Collective. So tell us a little bit about yourself and also tell us a bit about the Office Hour.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining us at this inaugural book club. My name is Crocodile Lightning. My pronouns is she, her, hers. I am the co-instigator of the Office Hour Collective. I have such a huge honor of bringing amazing humans like Simone and Elise to do our anti-oppression education together. And at the Office Hour, we lead with curiosity and compassion when it comes to social justice or anything anti-oppression, because we deepen our learning together by learning together. So that's what we're all about. And I'm so excited to dive into this book together.
Me too. Me too. I am so pumped. This was a really fun one. You actually were the one that suggested it, and I was really, really excited when you mentioned it because it was kind of one of those, like, I knew it had been around, but I hadn't had a chance to read it. And so kind of getting the chance to dig into it was really, really exciting. So yeah, so let me see. Okay, so what we're going to do today, because this is a short story collection versus a full book, what we're going to do is we're actually going to only talk about 3 of the stories because that kind of gives us more of a chance to dig a little bit deeper. And then after that, we'll kind of talk a little bit more broadly about the book as a whole. So the first story that I want to talk about is actually the first story in the book. So feel free, if you happen to have your copy of the book with you, you can turn to the very first story, which is technically on page 7, called Revolution Shuffle by Bao Phi. And let me see. So this story tells the story of 2 Vietnamese rebels during a zombie-filled epidemic and internment. Once the zombie virus wipes out 70% of the American public, which is mostly white, they are left wondering who is to blame. In this story, they choose to blame China, North Korea, and the Middle East, leading to work camps and forced labor to keep the zombies at bay. So I want to know, what about this story stood out to you, especially during kind of our post-COVID-19 world? Because for me, it definitely kind of stuck out seeing kind of that relation between a zombie epidemic and kind of the COVID epidemic. And by the way, I'm going to mention that, like, definitely popcorn. Just pop on in and, like, you can raise your hand or be like, I have something to say, because calling on people's too tricky. So just go ahead and speak your piece. Who wants to go first?
I could jump in.
Awesome.
So I have to say, I don't read a lot of fiction, let alone sci-fi. So I was going through the book and then I read zombies and I'm like, what? This has to, I know I did not just read zombies. Like, okay, what do they mean by zombies? And then I had to remember, okay, this is sci-fi. So they really are talking about zombies. But another thing that really stood out for me was just that the characters were American Vietnamese. And I have not come across a book where I've seen that. So that was just really beautiful to see. And then the story is really short, but there were so many facets to the female character as they talked about her loading the gun and the color of her toenails. And, you know, that was, as I pictured that in my head, that was just so wonderful to see. But also I couldn't help but think, when was this book written? Because this is like what's happening right now. This is so relevant. So lots of things in this short story, but I really appreciated it.
Yeah. No, it definitely felt like while I was reading it, I was like, oh, this feels so real right now. I know it's about zombies, but it's feeling real in this moment.
Yes.
What about you, Elise?
I have to agree, Simone. It's just so real. so real. I was thinking about the main character, the female Asian character, and if I may read one sentence from the book.
Please.
Her small long eyes slanted like two dark swans, beaks dipping in to kiss above her nose. She was beautiful, magnetic, even if she did not want to be. And my tears just rolled down.
Just so many feelings, all in that one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just that, right? Yeah. I don't read a lot of fiction either, and I intentionally choose this book with you because it's such a good way to stretch our imagination when we're thinking about building the future that we believe in. But wow, the description of an Asian character who's characterized as being so beautiful. Right? Yeah. So that.
Just all the feels.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And for me, there was just so many parallels with the pandemic that's going on now. Especially, there was this line, I'll say this line: the field was wide open for the survivors in America to pick a suspect, a villain, an origin for this nameless evil. So it just brought me back to how, earlier in this pandemic, when there was so much blaming and so much, it's your fault. And it was just eye-opening to see this in this book. And I've actually learned about a lot of hate crimes that were happening against Asian folks in the United States, especially in Illinois, through my job. So it was just eye-opening to see it in this book. As Simone said, I was like, when was this book written? And as well as zombies, I think about zombies in the context of, in the pandemic for us in that parallel, and how everyone was just, not everyone, but I noticed there was a lot of, mindlessness, and, how we all were just buying up toilet paper and panicking and just, and just blaming. And it's just interesting to just see the parallels in how, what is this book trying to tell us? I think we need to really read between the lines and see what is this book trying to tell us and how we can ensure that we don't get any more realer than we are now with this book. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of the fascinating thing about it, because we are right now, kind of living, and I'm going to actually ask a question about this a little bit later, but it's definitely interesting that we're right now kind of in this moment that feels a bit like a science fiction story. And I think it's really easy, especially in science fiction, there's a bit of a distance there where we're like, oh, but that's not happening right now. Yes, this is an allegory for this thing, but it's not our reality. It's just supposed to be a representation of reality, not actually the reality we're living. And I feel like stories like this one, kind of looking at our world now, it's like, oh no, we could be living that reality. We're not that far away from it. And I think a lot of times sci-fi is really good about kind of showing just how close we are to that reality at the same time as being far away from it. Because there is a semblance of science basis beneath it all that is rooted at least somewhat in reality. So it kind of gives that. It's so fascinating. Sci-fi was something I kind of got into later in life, and it's real, y'all. Sci-fi has stuff to say, if you were wondering. All right, so
Yeah.
mhm.
And I'd like to speak to the mindlessness
Yeah.
piece that Elise was alluded to earlier. And now that we're beginning to awaken to see the structural part of the US society, right, especially in policies. And the parallel that I see written in this chapter is the government convincing the Asian and Arab citizens that for your protection, we're going to put you in an internment camp per se, right, to protect you. But in fact, is it protection, right? And protecting whom, right? So I think when this awakening, we're beginning to see the bare bone of who has the power and what is built in place to preserve the power.
Exactly. And that actually kind of brings me to the next question that I was going to ask, which was kind of talking about how their world is kind of split into these quadrants where like the people who are on the East Coast are like everyone created giant walls and barricades, like anyone who could afford to, and generally speaking were white, were in these barricades. And then in the center of the country they built these giant machines that could control the zombies, but they have to be run by people. And so they created these internment camps and then stuck the majority of anyone who was other within, specifically Asian Americans, in those internment camps to work to kind of try to keep those machines running. And it's like these two rebels have these options of like, where can we go? If we can escape, if we can get out of this, where can we go? And the problem is that like anywhere they go, there's danger. In the north, there's like people with guns that will just kill anything that moves because they couldn't make it to the East Coast, so they barricaded their own way. And then if they stay in the middle, there's the zombies all there. And so I wonder so much about kind of the way that like America has kind of been able to segment itself, you know, with all of the divides that we're experiencing between the North and the South, and the fact that like everything has a divide inherently within it right now. And so I wonder about what does that say about like the kind of future we can have if we can't find a way to like reach past that, if we're always living in these extremes. I think it's really interesting and difficult to kind of parse out, because I could sit like the second I was reading it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly how that would go down. So what do you think would be kind of, and obviously fictional case because it is about zombies, but what do you think could have created more unity during that time? And like, how can we relate that to the kind of unity we're looking for now? I know that's a deep one. I know it might take a second, but if you got an answer.
I love it. And this is why we're here, right, Allison? Yeah. We have to start thinking about this. And it's hard for me to think about that question without analyzing the social structure that we're in the United States, that the culture is so rooted in punishment and blaming and criminalization, right? So for us to, you know, maybe when an issue arises, for us to like, who's to blame? And we shift that question to be, what do we need to get through this together? And for those who are the least considered, with the least power, in the lowest of the totem pole, what would they need to rise up, survive, and thrive as well?
Totally.
So it makes me think about, there was a quote in the beginning of the book. I'll read it really quickly, and it just says, "We believe it's our right and responsibility to write ourselves into the future." And I really love that these are two Vietnamese American people going in there to do this, like to say this. They're like, we don't know if this is going to work. We don't know what's going to happen, but we're going to go do it. Let's go, right? And I just think about if this were written by others, right? It would have been others who went in to save them. And I think that is such a huge start for me. I think everything that happens, there's this sense that we need to be saved by white people. Like they're the only ones who can do it. You know, they have the answers to everything. And just us getting in there, us being empowered, go, we can do it. We got this. We're going to do, I think that is such a huge start right there. So I love that, you know, when one feels empowered, they can empower the other, and those minorities rise and we go in and do it. I love that.
Yes. I totally agree.
And it's not just in science fiction, right? We see the anti-violence that's based in the community, right? There's so many community-based organizations that work on accountability, that is a part of transformative justice, that's a part of disability justice, that they are meeting the needs within the community without depending on the state, the police, or even child protective services, right? It's already here. It's always been here.
Yes. So many feelings. Oh, hang on, Elise, you're muted again. Okay, there we go.
And also the book mentions capitalism and how capitalism keeps, as Nat said, the totem pole, people at the top, people at the bottom, and how capitalism just affects the way people think, and just being, you know, not thinking about their neighbor and what they may need. So I think it's interesting to think what would a world look like away, like moving away from capitalism. What would that be like, you know?
No, for sure.
Systemic, institutional injustices. What if we moved away from those systems that uphold those injustices? I think that's what we need to be moving towards, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we can avoid the zombie apocalypse, right, y'all?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes. Yeah. And
in its many forms, in its metaphorical forms as much as in its real forms.
Layers and layers and layers. And I know we have 2 more chapters to cover, but this chapter is my home base. And I want to just highlight the little chit-chats between the 2 characters. Do you notice that?
Yes.
Right? They've been best friends for 5 months. Right? But the ease in the conversations, the love and the care. Wow. And I think that's the heart of how we transform, right? Even the oppressive conditions remain, right? But it's how we cultivate that healing space and safety, dignity, and connection with the person we trust and love, right? And that's how we get through it as a community.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're under kind of these extreme conditions, and yet they're still able to like make jokes and talk to each other in this like loving kind of casual, silly way. And I will say I very much related to a lot of their conversation was, what do you miss? And I was like, oh, do I feel that? Because I was like, I miss a lot of things. I miss going to bars. I miss getting to casually hug my friends, you know? Like, there's so many things when your world changes so abruptly and so in such a drastic way that like that feeling of what do you miss? And they were just talking about like these little things, like getting to go out and get like really good soup like just getting really good pho. I was like, oh, yes, I see you.
And let's not forget that while they were having this conversation, there was like a zombie coming their way.
Like they could just like, they're just like, over there's a zombie just coming by. It's fine. It hasn't caught our scent yet. We're good. Exactly. Yeah. Like being able to find like little moments of connection inside of like really dark circumstances. I feel like that says a lot about like the resiliency that I think in general people of color have to have in order to navigate the world. And I feel like the story definitely represents that resiliency and that ability to kind of still connect, which is so important. Oh, I'm gonna get teared up.
Absolutely. At our collective, we have a Google form where any curious social justice allies can submit a question, and all 9 of us, all trans, queers, Black, Indigenous, people of color, all come together as a collective to look at the questions and provide our thoughts and insights and engage in deeper discussions. One of the questions that we got was, when do we get to rest? Right. When do we get to rest? And I think the 2 characters illustrate such a beautiful example that you rest while you're doing the work.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think one thing that we're trying to encourage our curious social justice allies to steer away from is to get stuck in that I'm going to advocate and then I'm going to get compassion fatigued and I'm going to get burned out and I'm going to go to this 2-month-long yoga retreat.
It's like there's you've got to just keep doing the work all the time and just in little bits and ways you can handle.
Right. In ways that are aligned with your values.
Yeah.
And not go beyond your limits. And know that when you take risks, you are taking risk. Right. And then rest. Rest.
Yes. Yes. Alrighty. Let's go ahead and move on to the second story that we want to talk about today. So the second story is called Black Angel, and it's about a fallen angel with one wing who was cast out of heaven because she wanted to help the humans that she looked down on. When she encounters a building being raided by ICE, she must choose whether to enter the fray and try to save one little girl from being taken away. There's a lot to the story, and I just found Black Angel so fascinating. And I think it's kind of leading off of the conversation we were just having. I think it can be really easy these days to kind of look at suffering and not necessarily reach out. We all kind of have varying layers of privilege. And so sometimes it feels so much easier when you're dealing with your own suffering that you just feel like I don't have it in me to help someone else or to reach out beyond that. And so I'm curious about what did you think of kind of Black Angel's struggle and how she kind of got past that struggle in order to try to help someone else?
So this story really did it for me. I mean, I love this one. I have to say, again, I mean, this is after reading the first one. I was so thrown off. I'm like, a wing? Did I just read her wing? I'm like, right, this is sci-fi. Okay, it is a wing. But so many things just came to mind for me. One being, I think this idea that I'm reading that a lot of millennials are just struggling with the idea of Christianity, and people are feeling really indifferent. There's always the questioning God. If God is love, why does he let all these things happen? And in the story, we read about how Black Angel was kind of asking God to intervene when some people were being hurt, and he wouldn't. And I hear that so much from people, like, where is God when all of this stuff is happening. And Black Angel is just kind of, she's just kind of over it, right? And then this kid comes who kind of softens her a little bit. And you see that, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like a cantankerous old person, and they are just like not for anything. And then a little baby comes or a kid comes, and that's the only thing that kind of like livens them up. And this is kind of that situation. And it just reminded me that amidst all the negative and all the bad and all the harm, there's still good, there's still love. The mother, reading about the mother in what they did to kind of help their children, and just also that when we encounter these people who have this kind of like F the world attitude, there's something behind that, right? Like don't count them out. Be curious, as you would say, Nat. And I just loved reading about this character, even when they like, and I'd love to hear what you guys thought about like her not sharing her name, just A, and then the little girl's name was like Angelica, I think. Something happened for me there when I read that, and I don't even know what it was. I'm wondering if it happened for anybody else, and maybe you can share with me what it was. But I really love this one. This was a good story.
Now, I want to know what happened for you, Simone.
I don't know. It was just like, in my mind, when I read the little girl say her name was Angelica, something happened with A, with the angel, that like, I mean, she was already shifting, but when she heard that the kid's name was Angelica, that did it for her. Like, I don't know what that was, but it was a really powerful moment for me. Maybe A's name is Angelica. They share the same. I don't know. I loved it though.
Yeah, I kind of love how they can. I feel like a lot of stories do that, but definitely a lot of sci-fi stories. I think there can be like kind of this interesting emphasis on like not strictly naming your characters. Like a lot of times I'll read stories where it'll just be like the narrator did this, or it'll just be pronouns or something like that. And I think it definitely comes down to a question of like, is part of it her trying to disassociate from that angelic side of herself? Like, did she, and I think also the fact, I think in the story it says something about how they didn't have names in heaven, how it was kind of just their souls connected in a way that it was just like a large consciousness that everyone shared. And so I think at least I would imagine if I were her and I came from a place where I was connected to everyone and all of a sudden I wasn't connected to anyone, I would maybe reject the idea of a name, you know, be like, because that would be kind of accepting the reality of that I've been cast out, you know, like giving herself a name would be choosing to admit the fact that she is not connected to that big beautiful consciousness that she was a part of before, you know.
I can see that for sure.
Sci-fi is deep, yo.
Really,
it gets real deep. Like, it can do that. Does anyone else have any thoughts about kind of Black Angel and kind of her whole situation?
I was wondering about that too, the names and the way both of you spoke about it. It was so beautiful, right? That the angel part might be a part of you, or the part that you try to disconnect from. And I keep thinking about the allies that enter our program. There are always parts of them that feel so guilty about not seeing the influences of oppression before, and they are so guilty that they just want to shut that part out, right? And we keep telling them that, part of being an ally is making mistakes. And we know it sounds so cliche, right? But to be an effective ally, we embrace all of the parts. The part that is still learning, the part that has made mistakes, right? Just all of that.
Yeah. And I think she also, you can kind of tell her making the choice to try to save that girl is like her kind of embracing the fact that she has this power, that she has the ability to affect change, which I think sometimes people think because of whatever pain or suffering they're going through, that like they don't have the ability to push beyond it, and they don't have the ability to help someone else while suffering in their own ways. And so I thought it was really interesting that it was kind of like that literal thought process of being like, well, this sucks, my life situation sucks, and I'm in a really crappy situation, but that person's life is sucking real bad right now, so I could still help that person even though I am going through my own stuff. Like making the conscious decision to act, which I think a lot of people can kind of get stuck and not necessarily feel motivated to do.
And also how to use your privilege, power, and position creatively, especially under this pandemic that we're in, right? I think a lot of us are in full survival mode, and it's going to look differently from household to household, but I think we do have some assets, some power and privilege that right now we got to decide how to use them creatively.
Exactly. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was kind of the way that the human beings that were around her would kind of react to her. Specifically thinking about Tammy, who is a man that she saves at the beginning of the story, and then of course Angelica, who she saves closer to the end. And one thing I thought was really fascinating was kind of that both of them held very specific expectations of her, because they could tell, like, they knew she was an angel because she has this like big old wing stuck to her back, so like they know what she is, and so because they see her and know what she is, they're just like, oh, she's an angel, so of course she's gonna be like heavenly and sweet and like loving and caring, and she is absolutely none of those things, because she has a whole lot of feelings and she doesn't want to deal with any of your BS, and she don't got time for you. And like she makes it real clear. But I found it such an interesting like representation of kind of the expectations that we sometimes hold on to people, and kind of that the fact that we tend to look at someone and we make those like very quick, fast judgments of someone, and we don't necessarily know how to look past it. And especially when I think to me it said a lot about kind of the ingrained knowledge that we get, because if your image of an angel is informed by every image of an angel that you have ever received from when you were a little kid. Like, you have seen angels forever in all different forms, in all different ways. Expectation of what an angel is going to be is all of that. And so I thought that it was such an interesting kind of allegory for, I think, the way that people can prejudge others, and the way people make those snap judgments, and the fact that those snap judgments are coming from like all that stuff, just so much of it, and it feels like that can almost feel kind of overwhelming. And so I wonder about kind of your thoughts on like how this story is expressing that, and how to kind of contextualize that idea of all of that past knowledge informing your current self.
That is such a great point, and I love that you brought that up, right? Because when we think about angels, we think about these very heavenly bodies who only do wonderful things, who can do no wrong. And then we meet this black angel who's literally down to earth, right? She uses profanities. She smokes cigarettes. and she still did something very angelic. I mean, we looked at her. I think it was her singing that took like the negative away from the racist men. But it reminds me that in all of our work, right, we can be tired and fed up too. And reach those points where we feel like, I don't have time for this today. I'm not doing it. And you still do it. You push through because they're still that good. You still want to see this world, in spite of everything. She's like in Harlem, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's still this world and we have to be the change that we want to see. And I think she pulled that from somewhere deep inside. And the significance of the cigarette, right, and the foul language, for me, is like the breaths that we need to take. For some of us, it may literally be a cigarette. You may need to scream or have a moment, whatever it is that keeps you pushing and gets you through. So I love that they made this angel literally and figuratively down to earth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, so many feelings. I really love this book so much.
Yes, I never thought about the cigarette or curse words as just taking a breath so that you feel rejuvenated and then keep going, right? Because self-care is so important and so romanticized, and we can't always go get a massage, right? And sometimes it's just an intentional breath.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. In any way you can get it.
Yes. And I'm so curious about these stereotypes that we all carry when we think about an angel, right? And I think Simone, Elise, and myself, we carry intersecting social identities. And we've learned so much about what a trans woman of color should act or be like. And we have to fight against that internalized oppression too. And I wonder, Elise, if you have any thoughts about that.
Absolutely. Just existing, being an example, showing people that trans women of color can be educated and can have a job, an ordinary, regular job. Absolutely. And just educating people by sharing my story, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot to be said for kind of being able to advocate for yourself. Like the fact that like she advocates for herself that entire story. She is not mincing words. She is telling you exactly who she is, like every step of the way. She is not trying to hide who she is in any way, shape, or form. You know exactly who she is from like the jump. Which I think is really beautiful. And I think just like endears me to her, even though she's so rough around the edges, but it's like you can see so much truth in that, in the fact like her living truthfully and her being able to choose to live truthfully that way, which I think is really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Alrighty, so we got to keep moving because we're going to run out of time. Okay, so the last story I want to talk about is Lala Bella, which is this like sweeping story. It spans centuries. So Lala Bella is born from Ethiopian royalty in 1148 AD and is kind of kind, open-hearted person, like from the beginning, like loved by the people. And he's not ambitious, and he just wants to make the world better. And so he, because of competitiveness in his family, he chooses to leave the kingdom and live on a farm. And he and other agricultural workers, they all come together and end up developing like super extreme technology, like computers and flight and space travel. And things that are beyond even what we are able to do right now. And part of that is that they develop time travel and then are able to travel into the year 3000, and they discover that the world is not quite what they hoped that the future would be. And so Lala Bella has to choose between living the life he was given with a wife and children and being the king of Ethiopia, essentially, or his region, I mean, or traveling through time to try to find a solution to the impending kind of end of the world. So the scope of the story really struck me that, because the time travel, it's going like so wide reaching. And I think a lot of times when we think about the way that time travel is represented, it tends to be represented in kind of like a steampunky way, like as if the concept of time travel really only kicked in about 300 years ago. And so I was curious about kind of the reading experience of kind of the story that spanned so much time, and kind of that concept that time travel could be invented as early as 1148 AD versus it just being sometime within the past 300 years when steam was invented, or steam technology was invented. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say, because I didn't get to this one. I read the One Lasting Truth. Oh, I'm really curious. This one sounds really good.
Well, my initial thoughts is that it's not the full, but it sort of reminds me of the movie Black Panther, because it's imagining a world where, this African country wasn't colonized and they had so much technology. So it just reminded me of Black Panther and just letting my imagination go wild and just what's possible without, colonization. And absolutely, definitely. That was my thoughts for sure, just right off the bat.
Yeah, I got those vibes too, not gonna lie. Like, I was doing this, I was like, Black Panther! I definitely got that vibes, hardcore.
I'm with Simone, and moment of honesty, I have not gotten to this chapter.
Okay.
I'm feeling, I'm feeling the vibe, the Black Panther connection. Wow, and how important it is for us culturally to even have the reference to Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, for just the fact that we are able to kind of casually, kind of culturally throw that out there, I feel like says a lot about where we've moved to just in the past 5 years, 3 or 5 years. I think the movie came out about 4 or 5 years ago at this point. Maybe it wasn't that far back. I don't know. But just the fact that we've gotten to a point where there are movies that are that are set in Africa and are able to kind of tell those stories. And what's really exciting is there's lots of YA books especially that are telling those stories and kind of in a similar vein. And a lot of them are being adapted into TV shows and movies. So we're going to be seeing a lot more of these kind of stories in the next few years, which I think is incredibly exciting because it all just comes back to representation and being able to see yourself and being able to, and not just see yourself, but also for other people to see other people, you know? Like, representation is so important to me, but I think it's also equally important that, like, other people get to see other people and get to see kind of the different ways that our world exists. Because I think a lot of people don't always see that, you know? So yeah, so in that case, we'll go ahead and let's move on to, I just wanted to ask just a couple of quick questions just about kind of the book as a whole and kind of about sci-fi. Because I know for many of you this was a bit of a departure. So a lot of what Octavia Butler does with her stories, because she is kind of like, she was such a trailblazer when she was She was publishing basically between the years of 1976 and about 2004, 2005, like right up until her death in 2006. And she was such a trailblazer because she was creating what these days is kind of being seen as like visionary fiction, where it's not just about like the science, but it's also about society, kind of in the same way that stories like Get Out kind of are representing societal issues just as much as like scientific ones. And she was kind of a front runner in telling stories in that way, which is kind of the inspiration for all of these stories, is they're inspired by Octavia Butler and her writing. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was in traditional sci-fi, there's a writer named Robert Heinlein who he believes that there are 3 lines of thought that drive sci-fi writers. And the questions are, what if, as in, what if a black angel fell to Earth? If only, as in maybe if only in the country of Ethiopia could the technology of spaceflight exist in 1148 AD? And then if this goes on, which you can almost see a bit of, at least for me, you can see a little bit of that first story. If this goes on and another pandemic happens or the zombie apocalypse happens, how will we be divided? And so I'm curious about kind of that concept and like where does the intersection between telling stories that are true and telling stories that are not true come in? And especially for those of you who are not big sci-fi readers, like, which I 100% understand because it's the reality is important to read, but I'm curious about finding those realities in these more fantastical stories. So what was your experience kind of reading this book and like looking for truth within sci-fi?
Before we dive in, Allison, I'm so sorry. Simone has to leave.
Oh no! Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I totally understand. Well, thank you so much for being here and being a part of our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And I do want to say before I leave, there was a comment in the chat box. Being seen or reflected in literature is so powerful. And I cannot echo those sentiments. I mean, that is it. That is what this sci-fi experience has done for me. Because there was that part of it being real, and then that part of it that we don't see, but that could also be very real. This is like the stuff we want to see in our school, in our history books, in our schools. And what a place to start, right? I think if we could spread this all over, this would be it. This would be us in the future, inserting us in that literature. So that is it for me. That's the intersection. But thank you guys so much. This has been so beautiful and so powerful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We hope to see you again at the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
I love that Simone left with a mic drop moment.
Yeah, she really did. She was like, all right, here's what I got. Boop, I'm out. Just beautiful. So yeah, so if you guys would like to share a little bit of your feelings about kind of sci-fi and representation and kind of those intersecting of reality and non-reality together. Crocodile, want to go first?
I'm waiting for Elise.
Okay,
Sure.
Elise, want to go first?
Absolutely. Well, for me, in all of these stories, it's definitely representation, finding those parallels of what's going on now in the world. You know, I grew up loving sci-fi, like Lord of the Rings and all of those J.R. Tolkien books. And it was just a way to, one, she mentions it earlier in the book, to get away from the reality, but there's still reality there, right? There's still, I forgot who said this, but someone said that these types of books science fiction is a way to show people the world that they live in and what's the possibility of the future and what's needed to move society forward, those messages. I feel like a lot of science fiction has those social justice messages within them. So that's what I really see in this book. What this book is all about is the social justice and just moving forward and showing people showing people what's wrong in the world, but there's a way of improving. And I feel like that was a main theme in all of these stories, definitely. Mm-hmm.
No, for sure.
And just being the best you for others, definitely, within this system that we're all living in, this capitalist system.
Yes. Echoing all of those beautiful words, Elise. Wow, what a great way to combine reality and possibility together in written words where we can relate to in our felt senses, in our bodies and tissues and bones. Because when we think about, in the first chapter, for example, when they're about to barge into the prison or the internment camp, like my body just felt so propelled to action, right? And I think we just need these spaces to, jolt our senses into action.
Definitely. Alrighty, well, thank you all so much for answering these questions and talking to me about Octavia's Brood. I really, really loved this conversation. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to hand the conversation, I'm going to hand over the mic, metaphorically speaking, to Crocodile, who's going to lead us in kind of a little bit more of a deeper discussion.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I wish we could see you so we could have a rich discussion together. At the office hour, we always ground awareness and imagination in the context of action. Because as we know, the movement, it's a lot, it's long overdue, and sometimes we get lost in the shuffle, right? So we often have an exercise where we redefine what our core values are and what actions we're willing to take in the context of ourself as its self-reflection in our interpersonal relationship, whether it's with families, friends, and then in the community at large. It's almost like choose your own adventure, where you're grounded in and centered in your values, and then you pick a context where you want to take action in. Yeah, so I just want to leave everyone with those nuggets. And if you have more questions, whether it's about the book or what kind of actions that you would like to take, or something you read about social justice that you want to geek out about with us, please check us on Instagram and submit your questions. And then we can engage in a deep learning discussion together.
Yes. Thank you so much, Crocodile. I really appreciate the Office Hour Collective being a part of these events. I think this was such a wonderful conversation, and I cannot wait to do more of these with you guys. For sure. So I'm going to go ahead and announce what our next book for next month will be. This one, I am so incredibly excited about it. It is Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha. This is an incredibly powerful story, basically about, it is loosely based on some of the violence that occurred after the LA riots back in 1992. And it's about two families, a Korean family and a Black family, that are struggling to come to terms with violence that has deeply affected both of their lives. This book came out last year. We have it available online. I'm actually going to pop the link for the book right there in the chat. There you go. And for coming to the event today, if you decide to purchase the book today, you will get a 10% off discount. All you have to do is type in events at checkout as a promo code, and you'll be able to get that book for 10% off. You can also obviously purchase Octavia's Brood, which is linked below on the green button at the bottom of the screen. So we will be scheduled for our next culture exposure, which will be, let me double check and make sure I don't say the date incorrectly. That is scheduled for September 30th. So we actually have a bit of time before our next one, because that is actually 5 Wednesdays away from now, because September is one of those super long months that way. So you have 5 months to get your hands on Your House Will Pay, so that you can join us in an incredible discussion. We are still deciding whether or not we're going to do it on Crowdcast, or if we might be switching to Zoom, just so that we can have a little more back and forth discussion with the people that are attending the event. So we will let everyone know once we've made that decision, and we'll make sure to announce it and let you all know. Thank you all so much for being part of this event. Thank you, Elise, and thank you, Crocodile, for joining us. And we cannot wait to see you all again next month on September 30th. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Go. It's working on it, I promise.